Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1157 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. I'm not gonna lie guys, I'm a little shocked. Outside of full-on theory mode, I tend to reserve my expectations when it makes sense to me. And so we began this flashback and it was a King Herald flashback. I thought, okay, well that makes sense. We're in Elbaf, King Herald flashback. Probably relates somewhat to Loki as well, you know, and that's what we're going to get. And then suddenly it becomes a Rox D. Zebek flashback, but I'm still like, well, it's still like the main character should be King Herald and Loki. So it's just how Rox interacted with those two characters. Well, now we're sitting here and it seems likely that this is the entire God Valley flashback? We're getting the whole thing? I can't be the only person who is shocked. I'll happily eat my words here if we don't actually get the entirety of God Valley. Maybe it doesn't intersect with Herald. But man, it sure feels like it will. So look guys, I would never truly complain about getting content that I am super excited to know. And that's everything that is happening right now. But I'm also kind of wondering why it's important to know the entire history of God Valley just to tell King Herald's and Loki's story. All of this has to in some way be related, and that itself is a huge question. Anyway, we've gotten a few chapters of this so far, but maybe it's an important time to sort of take a step back and try to dissect this on a more macro level. Right now, the only reason why the relationship between Rox D. Zebek and King Herald matters is because Rox D. Zebek is trying to recruit King Herald onto his crew. But so far, he isn't biting. And the reason for this is that King Herald does not want to make enemies of the world government. You kind of hate to phrase it this way, but at the same time, kind of feel like you gotta. King Herald has totally bought the world government's propaganda. The rule breakers, the law breakers, the pirates are the bad guys. We, as the world government, are sometimes a very annoying entity that does some things that are questionable, but we are going about it the right way. We are just like you, King Herald. We want peace. We're nothing like those pirates who just want power. And on the flip side of all of this, you have Rox D. Zebek, who I think represents the fan base best in all of this, because Rox D. Zebek is simply aware of the things that are going on around the world, just like us. The world government is in essence a pirate crew who have disguised themselves as representing justice, but it's a facade. Bro, the world government is your enemy, but Herald refuses to see it. So within all of this, you have Herald's philosophy, what he believes to be true, which is essentially that violence is never the answer. Or at least violence shouldn't be the answer, but from time to time he gives in. This is the other half of the reason why Herald would never join Rox, because Rox represents this violent path. Siding with Rox is essentially an admission that diplomacy has no chance of succeeding. And all of this works beautifully with the reveal at the end of the chapter. The world government tell King Herald, you want to join the world government? Well, then you must kill Rox D. Zebek. So what's happening is King Herald is being pulled in two directions simultaneously. He's been asked to pick a side in the war of Rox versus the world government. And the irony of it all is that while the two are enemies, they both represent or stand for the very same thing, conquering the world. Herald wants to unite the entire world, but to join Rox, he must fight the world government, and to join the world government, he must fight Rox. In either direction, he cannot stand for peace. And if he chooses neither, he cannot accomplish his dreams. Like, bro, this is actually pretty heavy. Like, this has to be the day or close to the day where Herald's dreams just die. So I think that this starts to simplify where the story goes. I think that we already know that Herald does not succeed in killing Rox. And I personally even doubt that he would try. Certainly, if he tried to kill Rox, that would be perhaps the lowest moment in Herald's life. I'm unsure of how exactly to explain it, but it would be like calculated murder. Herald may lash out in anger from time to time, but it's just different when you plan for it. If you remember Ida's lesson to Herald, it's essentially that all these other various factions or group have something to offer Elbaf. Nothing in the world is meant to be destroyed. But you could see why it would be tempting. Between Rox and the world government, who would you need to ally with to be closer to your dream? Well, it's obviously the world government. And you already think that Rox is a bad guy with a terrible philosophy on life. Like guys, I cannot express how much this whole idea, which is very relevant to real life, pisses me off. it does. I value honesty, and Rocks is simply the honest version of the world government. Otherwise, they represent the same thing. So because Herald has been tricked and has bought this BS, he could believe that taking down Rocks would make the world a better place. So this is just another trick of the devil or deal with the devil. It's not quite as literal as, for instance, Dory and Brogy earlier on in the arc, but the world government are offering Herald everything that he would want for his soul. But from this, I think that you can start to gather what the world government is trying to achieve. They have been antagonistic to the country of Elbaf and Herald for decades. They've been stringing along this carrot of one day being able to join the world government, and it isn't precisely clear to Herald or to us, the readers, why they don't just let him have it. So this deal creates a theory. Herald's soul is simply too pure. The world government needs to break him, and I believe that they will do this by attempting to force Herald to do something that he would later regret. So I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that I think that this all relates to the circumstances that Imu requires in order to flip somebody, perhaps permanently, into a demon. Like, I think about Batman and Heath Ledger's Joker, right? Heath Ledger's Joker is trying to make Batman break his one rule, to prove that what he represents is fraudulent. So obviously we could be in line for a pretty big plot twist when it comes to what actually happened to King Herald 14 years ago that led to, we presume, Loki killing him. As a side note, I feel like it's super easy to forget that this is like where we're supposed to be going, right? I almost forgot myself. But the theory that I think that the majority of the community has gravitated to, and it can be subverted, but this is the theory, that eventually Imu succeeded in flipping Herald into a demon. So in my opinion, this is why this conversation and the story of Rocks D. Zebek is so vital to King Herald. While it's easy to get lost in the details, we're watching the downfall of the greatest man on the planet. I personally think that at some point, he breaks. And for now, I see this happening in one of two ways. Firstly, you have the world government's request of him, go and kill Rocks D. Zebek. Herald cannot do this. This is his one rule, right? Violence is never the answer. If he chooses to kill Rocks in order to join the world government, that would be the wrong move. But there's also a universe where Rocks D. Zebek is finally able to convince Herald that the world government is his enemy and must be fought. We also get a scene related to this from this chapter. Herald travels to a friendly island and discovers that the world government is there doing heinous shit. They explain that countries not affiliated with the world government are considered lawless territories and the people there have no rights. Then we get some absolutely beautiful extortion. Herald, you understand that Elbaf is under consideration for becoming a member nation, correct? Intervening to help us would be one thing, but you'll only hurt your membership bid if you intervene on behalf of the non-affiliated country. You'll love to see it. Also, this is very related to things that are currently happening in the world. I'm sure that you know that, but I'm going to say it anyway. One of my favorite aspects of the story that I feel like is under-discussed is that being lawful is not the same as representing justice. Many Marine characters have and continue to grapple with this distinction. Laws are not intrinsically good. And then to emphasize this point, the member of Cypherpole then shoots an innocent civilian. So then Herald, compelled by actual justice, breaks the world government's laws, which are seemingly designed to only protect themselves. But at the very least, I feel like you can see how Rocks' argument is becoming more compelling. There are already so many wonderful quotes from One Piece about this. This thing called justice changes its shape depending on where you stand. Or as Doflamingo tells us, justice will prevail? Of course it will, because whoever wins becomes justice. This is another one of those big, impossible dreams that you can equate to finding the One Piece. There are many people who long to find true justice. So I hope that you're following, but in this case, both Rocks D. Zebek and the world government, despite us siding with Rocks mostly at this time, right? Both of them represent the devil trying to steal Herald's soul. This is pretty much a 2v1. So whether it's while Rocks is alive or after he dies, he could influence Herald to attack the world government or seek its destruction. And this may also be what the Gorosei and Imu desire as well. If your goal is peace and justice, then you have to be the winner. That means you have to be king of the world, so you can decide the form that justice takes. And I hope that you guys have also noticed the layers to this as well, because Imu is obviously king of the world, but the world government is, in their own way, trying to unify the world, the same as Herald is pursuing. The philosophy is essentially that in order to unify the world, you must destroy the aspects which cannot or will not comply to your laws. So when he finally breaks and gives up on what he believes in, Imu is able to transform him into a demon, and that sets off the events 14 years ago. But whether it's repetitive or not, I do just want to remind you that Oda is an incredible storyteller, and he can be very subversive when he wants to. So we're assuming, and have been assuming for a long while, that Herald transforms into a demon, and that may not actually ever have happened. In my opinion, what we speculated before is a great story, but this version of the story might be the best. Herald never breaks. Until the day that he died, he continued to pursue whatever pathway he could find to avoid violence. So I just want you to think about this for a second. Mull it over in your brain. Let's assume that Herald never breaks, but he continues to strive for his dreams. Where does this go? What directions could this possibly go? In my opinion, guys, a lot of this story is about kingship. It's about authority. Obviously, Roxy Zebek is attempting to become king of the world, and Imu is actually this person. So with this in mind, perhaps the most profound thing that King Herald could do is toss aside his crown. Essentially, Imu offers King Herald a deal that Elbaf can join the world government, but you have to submit to me. So Herald returns to Elbaf and tells the other giants what he had done, and they actually killed him for it. And of course, Loki is a guy who worships Roxy Zebek, and allying with or becoming subservient to the world government in this manner would not sit right with him as well. As he told the God's Knights directly to their face, they are worse than scum. So this could be seen as a pretty epic betrayal, even if Herald stays true to his ideals. But obviously at this point, we're pretty deep in the weeds. But I just wanted to express the variations of this that I see, because I think all of it is still in play. And at the very least, it recontextualizes some of the things that we're getting right now to remind you of the story that, we supposedly began with. But yeah, let's rewind back to the beginning of this chapter, because the majority of events focused on Roxy Zebek. So we begin with the Rocks pirates raiding the Foot Colony, temple of the International Philanthropy Federation. I'm just curious, did anyone at all, dissect what is actually happening here? Because, good lord. This place is a sort of charity country. We're even told as the Rocks pirates are running away with the treasure that they found here, which is enormous. Please stop, that money was donated for poor children in need. And Big Mom says, yeah, right, if that was true, why hasn't it been turned over? You were going to keep it, right? And then later on the same page, you have this religious figure whose hat almost looks kind of like a crown, but is not quite a crown, say, damn it, these bastards know everything about us. So this is literally a charity-based criminal operation, most likely. People donate to them for children in need, and they keep the money. Or at the very least, most of it. Look, man, one of the central ideas of One Piece is power corrupts, and also money is power. So this is another time where it's very clear that Oda is inspired by actual world history in creating events in One Piece. There have been, confirmed multiple times, charity organizations which are fraudulent. And even if they aren't obviously committing fraud, there's many times where the line is blurred, legally speaking. You get examples like a charity organization takes in millions in donations, but only distributes hundreds of thousands of that for whatever their cause is supposed to be. A huge sum of this money ends up going towards overhead costs, or costs of doing business, or salaries of the executives. So guys, I'm not telling you to not donate towards charities, but this is something you have to keep in mind and research. Unfortunately, a lot of people like to start charities because it makes them personally wealthy. It can easily become a foolproof scam. So honestly, I'm glad that Oda decided to touch on it. It's a pretty solid example of the legal world acting a lot like pirates. So when you read this chapter at Roxy Zebek, you should really think about it like Roxy Zebek is attacking A nation, yes, but a pirate operation. Just one that has very cleverly disguised itself and pretends not to be that. But yeah, if this conversation makes you a little bit sick to your stomach, welcome to the world of pirates, and Oda discusses that a little bit more, again in this first page, with the Rocks pirates. It's funny that I brought up Batman and Heath Ledger's Joker earlier on in this review, and we get another scene that I could compare to that movie here in the first page. The very beginning of The Dark Knight starts off with the Joker and his team trying to rob a bank, and as part of the plan, each member of the team is tasked with killing one of the other members so that when they take the treasure, they don't have to split it. Apparently, Shaki finds this to be a very good idea. It's also so much funnier in this chapter because he's trying to do this to people who are practically unkillable, which makes it a little bit more lighthearted and idiotic. The panel of Whitebeard getting pissed off and using his quake fruit to shake the entire island to free himself, and the reaction of Shaki, priceless. But there's something else that's interesting in all of this. The Rocks pirates are obviously insanely powerful, and while this country put up a fight, it's still the Rocks pirates with Whitebeard, Kaido, Big Mom, Shaki, Rocks himself, etc. So they really don't stand a chance. And I imagine that this infiltration, this theft, really didn't take that long. But by the time that they're ready to leave, the Marines have already arrived. So Whitebeard was pretty observant to this, and he says, well, that was fast. Did somebody leak our plans? You guys already know that I'm getting excited because you know what this implies? This implies a traitor. Let me take a moment to inject this straight into my veins because this is what I live for. This also works incredibly well with everything that we got before in this scene because Shaki is betraying Rocks, and this is sort of implying like, hey, just so you know, there may not just be an idiot doing this. The moral of the story is, in the world of pirates, anything goes, if you can get away with it. But we'll come back to this a bit later. But I really love the lore that this starts to generate for Rocks and the Rocks pirates. Essentially, they're fighting within themselves and the world is fighting against them, and through all of it, they survived. In fact, not only did they survive, they prospered. The narrator tells us that although the Pirate King Gol D. Roger was around during this time, it would be fair to say that this was the era of Rocks. Which, good lord guys, that line slapped. Honestly, I hope that you guys forgive me for this, but I want to interject a bit of my own agenda. Obviously, a lot of people compare Luffy to Gol D. Roger for obvious reasons. I think from a personality standpoint, Luffy is probably much more similar to Roger than Rocks. However, one thing that has always kind of been a question in my mind about Roger is it took Roger his entire adulthood in order to find the One Piece. The man started with Rayleigh and had no beard, and by the time that the journey concluded, he was over 50. So I think it sort of implies that while Roger was a badass, he was also pretty cautious about what he was doing. I just hope that y'all realize that Luffy is doing this on hard mode. He is going to accomplish what Roger accomplished, and he's going to do it in a fraction of the time. And if I had to put my finger on the reason for this more than anything, it's that there's no challenge or no obstacle that Luffy is not willing to take on or go through. Did Roger seek out government agents such as the Shichibukai? I don't think the Shichibukai actually existed, but if they did, would he have done that? I don't think so. Would he have attacked Enies Lobby? I don't think so. Would he have attacked Impel Down? I don't think so. These are the kinds of things which are accelerating Luffy's adventure. So look, I just want to prepare you, right? If you think about the relationship thematically between Roger and Rocks, why they're the same or why they're different, I think that this has been inverted in the current generation. Blackbeard has some aspects of Roger, and Luffy has some aspects of Rocks. Basically, I think that Roger was kind of careful like Blackbeard, and Luffy is more reckless like Rocks. I know Roger was probably also reckless to some degree, but Rocks is clearly on another level, the same as Luffy. This is why, at this exact moment in the story, Rocks has surpassed Roger. But at the same time, the implication of this is that, obviously, being reckless has potential downsides. Rocks ultimately loses. So it's just a reminder that although Luffy succeeds, the likelihood of success, the amount of luck and random chance required, is immense. It's also highlighting the importance of having genuine friends, which will likely be Rock's ultimate undoing. Anyway, I feel as though Oda is aware that a lot of the readership of One Piece right now are probably sympathetic with Rocks. He's not quite Robin Hood, but a lot of people see the justice in taking from those that take from others. I think that most people would tell you if they had to choose between Rocks or the world government, they would take Rocks 100 times out of 100, because we simply know the world government and its leaders too well. The leader is literally the devil. So with this in mind, I kind of feel like Oda views it as important to remind us that, hey, Rocks is not the good guy. Sure, if Rocks won, the world would be turned upside down, but you would just have a new king of the world, and the world wouldn't find its one piece or its justice. So I thought that it was really smart that Oda chose to convey this through a character that we should all understand is the most pure, and therefore the most trustworthy. And that's Ida. So whether or not you agree is irrelevant, and if you think that Ida and or potentially Oda is being naive, this is where the story is likely going. Ida practically spells it out to Herald that, hey, you shouldn't be friends with Rocks. You should choose your friends wisely. And while we've talked about this on a more philosophical level, this could also be an epic moment of motherly intuition. Rocks wants to portray himself as the good guy fighting against the bad guys. But Rocks could also be a much more sinister character than he is willing to let on. Like the devil, he is trying to trick people. So all of this leads us to the final section of the chapter, 42 years ago in Hachinosu, and we get a big news drop that Shaki has quit as captain of the Kuja Pirates, which immediately crushed a lot of the pirates' dreams of being defeated by her, which I enjoyed. But then we get what I think is a pretty epic plot twist. Shaki decides to take root in Hachinosu and become its bartender. So guys, I know that if you follow the channel, especially if you read the comments of my last review, I made a pretty critical error. I confused Gloriosa and Shaki, and I thought that Shaki had joined the Rocks Pirates, and I, as I tend to do, I ran with it in my review, took it to all sorts of places, but this time based on an entirely false premise. Honestly, I was pretty bummed about that. Honestly, there's two ways in which this kills me. First off, as a content creator, I think that you should have standards about making sure that you inform people of things that are actually true. Like, going into the world of speculation is fine, but make sure that you're actually giving people actual facts and not saying the wrong thing. And then number two, the majority of people who actually watch me are insane One Piece fans. A lot of you are probably even more knowledgeable than I am, so the standard is pretty high to make sure that I'm saying things that check out with what you already know. So I thought it was hilarious that in this chapter, it basically confirmed the incorrect fact that I shared in the last chapter. The premise that Shaki joins the Rocks Pirates. I mean, I guess she doesn't technically join, but for all intents and purposes, a lot of what I speculated there is now suddenly valid. Honestly, I kind of feel as though I've ascended to prophet level like Usopp. Suddenly, my lies are becoming truth. My headcanon, and I'm sticking to it, is that Oda watches my channel, felt really bad for me, and was like, no wait, hold up JB, I got you. You cannot convince me otherwise. But anyway, I just want to make sure that I say this. I apologize for the prior review regardless, and I can't necessarily promise that it won't happen again, but I'll try to do better, to the best of my ability. So anyway, Shaki strolls into Hachinosu. Everyone is just smitten with her, and that includes Rocks himself. The narrator then chimes in. The pirate island of Hachinosu was abuzz with excitement. Shaki's rip-off bar had finally opened. They say the wait just to get in would take over a month. Shaki was like a flower blooming in a dry wasteland. Her very presence enriched the island. The inhabitants of Hachinosu came to covet her as a treasure, an irreplaceable crown jewel. Unfortunately, a treasure is always the inevitable target of theft. Guys, this chapter is suggesting that the thing that the world government, the great treasure that the world government stole from Hachinosu and then took to God Valley, which inspired the Rocks Pirates and the Roger Pirates to go there, was Shaki. That is literally what we should be thinking. I believe that Oda has spoiled the cause of God Valley. But yeah, there's been an absolute crazy amount of discussion and conversation relating to this. Some people don't like it. They don't like the idea that it's because of a woman, because of love, that Roger and Rocks came to God Valley. And in my opinion, some people are in straight denial. I guess if you like this or not, it's subjective. You can like whatever you want to. But if you're gonna cope, at least know it. We know that Roger was in love with Shaki. We can see Rox's reaction to Shaki, which is very similar. And Shaki is now the crown jewel treasure of Hachinosu, and some treasure was taken from Hachinosu by the world government. Like, it's just, at this point, nearly canon. Shaki was taken. That is why both Rox and Roger traveled to God Valley in order to get her back. But saying this, that doesn't mean that this is the entire story, right? There could still be layers. Rox may be captain of the Rox Pirates, but at the same time, I think that he needs to convince his crew that whatever they do is going to be worth their time. They're all individualistic and greedy, and they're out for their own ends, right? So part of the package that Rox would have to sell in order to get his crew to God Valley is, hey, also in God Valley, we have some crazy devil fruits which we can steal, and or other different kinds of treasure which might interest you. But I really do think that the primary thing that Rox wanted to obtain or steal back was Shaki. But I do want to flesh this out a little bit more, because there's a pretty glaring question in all of this that some of the characters actually touch on, which is, what is Shaki's motivation in all of this? She left the captaincy of the Kuja pirates. She left her own people to set up shop in Hachinosu, and why? It's unlikely to be out of the goodness of her heart. And if you take yourself back to the Sabaody Archipelago arc, one of the first things that Shaki says is, information is a weapon. So from this, a pretty compelling theory is that Shaki set up shop in Hachinosu in order to gather intelligence from the pirate world and most likely sell it for some sort of gain to other factions. So once again, we have another story about pirate treachery. Oda often hides information within the context of a chapter. There's some theme that ties a chapter together, and if you're able to unravel it, it gives you clues as to where the story might be going. So the theme of this chapter, very, very transparently, is betrayal. At the very beginning, Rox pirates are betraying each other. Some are doing this obviously and stupidly. Others might be doing this more covertly. Then you go to Herald. Herald betrays the world government because the world government is betraying him. You go to the end of the chapter, we know that a treasure is stolen, Shaki is stolen. This is also related to betrayal, so all of this ties the chapter together. Everyone is betraying everybody else. But I think that you should keep in mind that the main character of this flashback is supposed to be King Herald, and the circumstances of Elbaf and his goals and dreams. So while Rox being betrayed might be part of this story, what we should really be waiting for is the moment that Herald is betrayed in some sort of irreversible way. So look guys, my theory is that basically what this entire flashback is explaining is how the world government and Imu operates, the methods that they use in order to control the world. And this information might end up becoming vital here sometime soon, especially if we pan back to the Revolutionary Army, and this sort of explains the backstory of that entire conflict as well. But the idea in a nutshell is that the world government creates circumstances so that their enemies fight each other, or in some other way doom themselves. So what I personally think happened is the world government backed Shaki into a corner and basically threatened her home country of Amazon Lily. Shaki was forced to take base in Hachinosu and become their spy so that she could save her own people and essentially fulfill her own dreams. So it's another version of the exact same thing that is happening to King Herald. And I also think that the world government stole Shaki because they knew what would happen. It was literally a trap. I really think that they orchestrated God Valley. Guys, would it shock you if it's revealed that the Gorosei and Imu don't care about the Celestial Dragons or even the God's Knights at all? That would shock nobody. All of it was bait, and both Roger and Rox took it. Guys, I wonder if Imu somehow figured out or knew that all of this would lead to Rox D. Zebek losing, and potentially even knew that all of this would culminate in a fight between Rox and Roger. Maybe I'm thinking about Imu as too much of a Giga Brain character, but for me, this makes a lot of sense. They figured out a way to pit Roger and Rox against each other, and so in this case, the world government is in a win-win scenario. They say that the devil sows treachery and discord. This would fit the description. But before I end this video, I just want to make sure that I say this. The beginning of this chapter implies that there's another traitor within Rox's crew who might be more cunning than Shaki. Someone informed the Marines of Rox's plans so that the Marines could intercept them at this island. And at the end of this chapter, you might guess, well, Shaki could be this person, but I think that this sequence is being described to us chronologically. So Shaki hadn't yet arrived in Hachinosu in order to inform the Marines or the government of what the Rocks pirates intended to do. So there's still an open-ended question about who this other traitor could be. The answer that I think would shock the most people is this could potentially be Whitebeard. I don't actually believe this to be true, and I don't want this to be true because I see Whitebeard as being a very honorable person, but at the same time, I think that Whitebeard has enough issues with Rocks, potentially joined him and then, doesn't really want any part of what's happening. Just something that might be worth saying is it took pretty extreme circumstances for Whitebeard and the world government to finally declare war against each other. There might be a sort of pseudo-alliance here that was only broken because Whitebeard eventually adopted Gold D. Rogers' son. We also know that the world government, for the most part, didn't mess with the Whitebeard pirates for several decades. The way it's described at the beginning of the story is, well, the Whitebeard pirates were just so strong that the world government wouldn't dare. But given what we know about them now in Emu, I don't think so. I think whether Whitebeard knew this or not, he was performing some sort of role that the world government considered to be valuable. Even if this role was essentially to prevent any other pirate from obtaining the One Piece. That's why they let them be. But to actually express an idea that I want to believe in, look at a character like Miss Bakken. I think that there's so much potential here just because we still have Edward Weevil in the story and nothing has happened with that guy. So Bakken being the traitor, first off, would make a lot of sense from a character standpoint. She's not necessarily portrayed as the strongest, so you would see her as existing in the Rocks Pirates as more of a cunning figure, but it could also lead into some explanation for the existence of Edward Weevil. Also would do a good job of explaining how Vegapunk and Miss Bakken might have had some sort of relationship leading to the creation of the clone Stussy. Also, Stussy's existence itself is kind of like a huge clue that, hey, Miss Bakken is totally capable of being an agent, a Cypherpole agent. So that's literally what she might have been doing in her actual life. And in fact, she was so good at it that they decided to clone her. But anyway, guys, I think that is everything that I had to say today. It goes without saying, another incredible chapter of One Piece. Flashback One Piece is literally the best. But as always, I'm curious as to what you guys think, whether you noticed something from the chapter that I might have missed. Share your thoughts. If you're interested, check out my book, The Booms. Link is in the description. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.